He was supposed to go to work, and he disappeared without a trace. No goodbye, just gone. 20 years later, his son walks through a museum and locks eyes with something behind glass. A preserved body, perfectly displayed, admired for decades. It was his father. Not a victim, not a memory, an exhibit. A jealous friend, a secret drug network, an underground trade in human bodies. They didn't just kill him, they sold him, piece by piece. But the son grew up brilliant, calculating, patient. And when he finally uncovered the truth, he didn't call 911. He built something far more dangerous. Justice, or something darker. Because when you discover your father was turned into inventory, the real question isn't what happened. It's how far you're willing to go to make them pay. Before we continue, I invite you to leave a comment on where you are watching from and the time you are listening to this story. Newark, 2016. The smell reached Lorraine Carter before the truth did. Old preservative chemicals, powdered dust, something organic that had no right to still exist. She stopped just inside the doorway of the condemned warehouse room while police tape whispered against the metal frame. An officer said something about procedure, about formal identification, about waiting. But a mother does not wait for permission to recognize her child. Metal tables stretched across the concrete floor in sterile rows. Overhead lights buzzed. Each table held what investigators were calling recovered inventory. Labeled specimens remain arranged with clinical precision, cataloged, numbered, logged as evidence. Once sold, therefore once owned. Lorraine's eyes moved carefully, not scanning, searching, as if her restraint could delay what she already felt tightening in her chest. An arm with faded preservation stitches, not his. A jaw reconstructed with resin, not his. A torso tagged with a red evidence strip, not his. She exhaled, just once. But relief inside a room like this is temporary. It waits for you to look again. Her gaze shifted to the far table near the cracked window. Something small rested beside a sealed container, an accessory item, logged separately. The ring. Real gold casing, slightly dulled, the jade strap worn soft at the bend. Her fingers trembled before they touched it. She had bought that ring at a street stall the week Abel started his first office job. He had laughed, embarrassed, adjusting his collar in the mirror. "I need to look professional, Mama," he said, "and jade represents daily blessings." She remembered that part clearly, because she had kissed his cheek and told him blessings follow men who come home. Her knees gave way before her mind could finish the math. 20 years. 20 years of missing posters, police interviews, cold case files boxed and archived. 20 years of telling herself he was alive somewhere. But the ring did not lie. Evidence tags do not lie. And the inventory sheet clipped to the table did not lie. Rain pressed her palm to the cold metal surface and whispered his name like it might rewind time. Abel. Her son had disappeared on his way to work. Therefore, someone had intercepted him, and someone had cataloged him. But before Lorraine Carter stood inside a human specimen trafficking lab, before she identified her missing son among merchandise, we need to return to the last night Abel Carter was still breathing, because he saw something that evening, and he should have kept walking. Abel Carter grew up in a place where ceilings leaked and hope did not. Rainwater traced brown veins across their apartment ceiling every monsoon season. Therefore, buckets became permanent furniture. The wiring sparked if the fan and stove ran at the same time. The refrigerator hummed like it resented existing. Winter drafts slipped through window gaps stuffed with folded newspaper that carried headlines about other people's success. Lorraine called it temporary. But Abel understood the difference between temporary and stuck. He noticed everything. The skipped meals she disguised as not hungry. The overdue bills hidden beneath grocery flyers. The way she ran bathroom taps at night so he wouldn't hear her crying. He never confronted her about the tears, therefore he stored them, like fuel. At 16, he stood in that dim kitchen, one bulb flickering overhead, and made a promise that sounded too large for the room. "One day I'll buy you a house, a real one, with sunlight, not an apartment with borrowed light from neighboring buildings, not windows facing brick walls, a house where the sun entered without permission." Lorraine laughed softly, but it wasn't disbelief, it was survival. Believing in him felt easier than accepting permanence. Abel had always lived in sunlight, not literal sunlight, though he chased it, working odd outdoor jobs whenever he could, but the kind that comes from believing your circumstances are temporary. Therefore, he studied harder than exhaustion allowed. By 26, he was a junior electrical technician at a small renewable startup outside Newark. The pay barely shifted their situation, but his mind was already elsewhere. At night, in the narrow garage beneath their building, he built something no one around him fully understood. Sheets of recycled composite, salvaged conductive mesh, second-hand microinverters he refurbished himself, a modular solar panel system assembled from low-cost waste materials. If it worked, entire low-income blocks could generate independent power for a fraction of commercial rates. If it worked, energy companies would lose leverage. If it worked, poverty wouldn't loosen its grip. It would fracture. But innovation attracts attention, and attention is rarely neutral. The garage smelled of solder and burnt insulation. Abel hovered over a thin silicon wafer layered between recycled composite panels. He adjusted micro-wiring with surgical precision, muttering voltage calculations under his breath. "One more week." That's what he told his mother. "One more week, Ma. Once I demonstrate stable output, I'm filing provisional protection." He didn't use the word patent around her. It sounded expensive. Lorraine wiped her hands on a dish towel and watched him like she had when he was small, assembling broken radios just to see how they worked. "You're going to tire yourself out," she said. "I'm tired already," he replied. "Might as well be tired building something." But he didn't tell her about the meeting invitation. An email had arrived 2 days earlier. Private investors, interested in scalable renewable innovation, requesting a demonstration. He should have been excited. Therefore, why did the wording feel rehearsed? He reread it every night. The sender's domain checked out. The meeting location seemed legitimate. A shared industrial workspace, evening slot. Discretion requested. Discretion. That word lingered. But ambition can drown out caution. Abel wasn't chasing wealth. He was chasing leverage. He imagined handing Lorraine a set of house keys. Imagined her standing in a sunlit kitchen without flickering bulbs. Imagined her hands healing. Therefore, he accepted the meeting. He didn't tell her the real reason he'd be late that Thursday. He just kissed her cheek and said, "Soon, Ma. I mean it." She touched his face the way mothers do when they are memorizing without knowing they are memorizing. "Sunlight," she reminded him gently. He smiled, and for a moment it felt close enough to touch. But outside their apartment, someone else had already run the numbers. A modular system built from recycled composites. Independent grid capability. Low deployment cost. Scalable. Threatening. Profitable, if controlled. That same week, Abel noticed something small. A car parked across from the garage 2 nights in a row, engine off, windows tinted. He told himself it was nothing. Therefore, he kept working. On the night of the meeting, he packed a prototype module into a reinforced case. He hesitated at the door. The apartment felt unusually quiet. Lorraine had fallen asleep on the couch, the television casting blue light across her tired face. He almost woke her to explain, but he didn't want her to worry about investors or risk or possibility. He wanted to return with proof. So he stepped into the hallway, and as the stairwell door closed behind him, the garage light flicked off automatically, plunging the workspace into darkness. They finally gathered outside his flat. Two dark premium Mercedes-Benz sat across the road. "Is this your home?" one man questioned. Abel confirmed yes. "Fine, so we have been tracking your project, and we must say we're impressed. So you must await our call." Abel, with pure joy, replied yes, and they sped away, Mom observing from the glass. Now it appears her son's dream will finally become a reality. If you enjoy dark stories like this one, subscribe, because more mind-chilling stories are coming up in the days. By 26, Abel Carter was a junior electrical technician at a small renewable startup in Newark. It sounded ordinary, but nothing about the garage beneath his apartment was ordinary anymore. Clara sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, sorting through his scattered diagrams like they were fragile maps. She had known him since they were 17, back when ambition sounded like fantasy, back when luxury meant buying brand-name cereal without checking the price. "You're going to change the world, Art," she said, kissing his temple. "Just don't forget us little people when you're a mogul." He laughed. Therefore, she laughed. But he held her longer than usual. The prototype rested between them. Modular solar composites layered over recycled thermal capture mesh. It didn't look revolutionary. It looked patched together, improvised. But revolutions rarely look expensive at the beginning. His friends didn't fully understand the schematics. They understood one thing. Abel was building something that didn't belong in their neighborhood. "Sunlight for broke people," Marcus Reed joked, leaning against the workbench. Tyrone Hale added, "Man's about to outshine the electric company." Leon Briggs didn't laugh. He stood near the garage entrance, arms folded, eyes moving between the prototype and the street outside. "If this works," Abel said quietly one evening, tightening a micro-connector, "poverty isn't permanent anymore." That wasn't optimism. That was conviction. They had grown up together. Abel, Marcus, Tyrone, Leon. 4 boys who watched classmates leave for universities, internships, new cities. They remained. Same streets, same ceilings that leaked. Abel believed success was scalable. Therefore, he believed escape could be shared. "We all get out," he said once, "not just me." Marcus clapped him on the back. Tyrone grinned. Leon said nothing. But silence has texture. Clara noticed it before Abel did. "Leon's been different," she whispered one night after the others left. "Quieter." "He's just stressed," Abel said. "We all are." But Leon wasn't stressed. Leon was calculating. He watched investors start circling. He overheard fragments of phone calls. He noticed Abel staying late at the startup lab, accessing simulation software far above his job description. Breakthrough technology attracts more than praise. It attracts leverage. One Thursday evening, the garage felt too small for what they were building. Clara handed Abel a stack of revised schematics. "You ever think about what happens after?" she asked. "After what?" "After it works." He paused, because he had thought about that. He imagined filing protection papers, scaling manufacturing, partnering with municipalities, electrifying low-income blocks at cost. But he hadn't imagined resistance. He hadn't imagined opposition. He certainly hadn't imagined betrayal. "We build," he said finally. "That's what happens after." Clara smiled. But she studied him like she was trying to memorize something fragile. Later that week, Abel told the group about the meeting. Private investors. Scalable deployment interest. Discretion required. Marcus whooped. Tyrone demanded celebratory drinks. Leon asked for the address. "Why?" Abel asked lightly. "Just curious." Curiosity is harmless. Therefore, why did it land heavy? Clara squeezed Abel's hand under the table. "Just be careful," she murmured. He brushed it off, not arrogantly, just optimistically. He believed intelligence was protection. He believed transparency among friends was safety. But Leon went home that night and opened his laptop. He researched acquisition clauses. He researched silent partnerships. He researched what happens when innovation is easier to own than to compete against. The prototype in Abel's garage could disrupt regional utility contracts. It could undercut pricing structures. It could empower neighborhoods investors had long profited from keeping dependent. Abel saw liberation. Leon saw leverage. The night before the meeting, Clara stayed late. They lay on the garage floor, staring at the exposed rafters. "When this works," she said softly, "promise me we leave. Somewhere with actual sunlight." He turned toward her. "I promise. But promises are fragile when other people decide they're inconvenient." Outside, a car idled longer than necessary. Leon stood across the street pretending to scroll his phone, watching headlights reflect off the garage door. He wasn't smiling, because he had already made a decision, and decisions like his don't just change futures. They erase them. The next evening, Abel would walk toward opportunity, believing his friends stood behind him. But one of them would be waiting somewhere else. The prototype worked on a rainy Tuesday night. Abel stood in the garage, soaked from the storm, water dripping from his sleeves onto concrete already stained with oil and solder burns. The multimeter trembled slightly in his hand. Stable voltage. Continuous output. Efficiency above projected target. He blinked once. The reading did not disappear. He adjusted the load resistance. The output held. He increased draw. It compensated. For a long moment he just stared at the numbers glowing against the dim garage light as if reality might correct itself. But the numbers didn't flinch. It worked. Not theoretically, not almost. It worked. He shouted so loud the upstairs neighbor slammed a broom against the ceiling. He didn't care. He laughed. He cried. He pressed both palms against the workbench and lowered his head, shoulders shaking. Therefore, everything changes now. By morning, he had compiled performance data, thermal stability logs, scalability projections. He attached them to 3 email threads he'd been nurturing for months. Normally, those firms responded with polite deferrals or silence. This time, one replied within hours. Helios Grid Systems. The subject line was short. Demonstration inquiry. He read it once. Then again. They wanted a live demonstration at their California headquarters, all expenses covered. If successful, they proposed acquisition of his design for $5 million, plus a permanent research position at $100,000 per month. He stopped breathing halfway through the sentence. $5 million. That wasn't escape money. That was generational correction. He read the email 10 times, scanning for inconsistencies. The domain was legitimate. The signature block traced to executives listed publicly. The language was precise, corporate, clean. But the speed of the reply unsettled him. Interest that quick is rarely casual. He pushed the doubt aside. Therefore, he called Marcus first. "Pack your jaw," Abel said, barely containing himself. Marcus didn't understand at first, then he did, and the shouting started all over again. Tyrone whooped loud enough to distort the speaker. Leon listened quietly. "Tonight," Leon said after a pause, "we celebrate." It sounded generous, but it sounded measured too. Abel didn't notice. He ran upstairs instead. Lorraine was in the kitchen folding laundry. He didn't speak. He just lifted her off the ground and spun her once like he used to when he was small. "California," he said breathlessly. "5 million, Ma." She stared at him, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. They danced in that narrow kitchen until both of them were crying. She pressed her forehead against his chest and whispered the same word over and over. Sunlight. Therefore, the house was no longer a metaphor. It was paperwork. He called Clara next. She answered on the second ring, breathless. "Art?" It worked. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. When he told her about Helios Grid Systems, about the acquisition figure, about the research position, she sat down wherever she was standing. There was something else in her voice that night. Something soft. Something trembling. "I was going to tell you this tomorrow," she said carefully, "but maybe this is the right moment." He waited. "I'm pregnant." The word landed heavier than the money. He leaned against the kitchen counter, sliding slowly to the floor. Pregnant. Therefore, the future wasn't abstract anymore. It had a heartbeat. They both cried, quietly at first, then openly. "The baby is a blessing," she whispered. "But be careful in celebration, too. Let success arrive first. Don't count it before it's real." It wasn't fear. It was instinct. "Chill, babe," he laughed gently. "Success is here already." She smiled through tears. "Okay, my love." But instinct doesn't disappear just because joy gets louder. That evening, Leon arranged the celebration. Not at a bar they usually went to. Somewhere quieter. A private back room in an industrial loft owned by a friend. "Just us," Leon assured. "No distractions." Abel didn't question it. Why would he? They had grown up together, shared hunger, shared ceilings that leaked, shared every plan to escape. But celebration is the easiest place to lower your guard. Most people scroll past dark stories like these without subscribing, but the truth is, every video costs hours to make. I will appreciate your support of my channel. By 4 p.m., the Rusty Bolt smelled of beer, fried food, and survival laughter. Abel sat in the center booth, phone in hand, the Helios grid system's email still open like proof that reality hadn't reset itself. His friends leaned in close as if proximity made success transferable. 5 million, Tyrone repeated, shaking his head. Leon whistled low. "Man, you're out." "Not out," Abel corrected gently. "Up, we all go up." Marcus raised his glass first. "To Abel Carter, the one who made it." Glasses clinked. Abel's smile was bright enough to light the table. Marcus's wasn't. He listened as Abel mapped the future out loud. A house for Lorraine with sunlight pouring through wide windows, seed funding for Marcus's food truck idea, capital for Tyrone's auto shop expansion, a hiring pipeline back into their old neighborhood once manufacturing scaled. Factories in poor neighborhoods, energy independence, ownership. Every word expanded the room around Abel. But every word narrowed something inside Leon. Leon Briggs worked contract tech recruitment, commission-based, unstable, a string of calculated risks that hadn't paid off, and beneath that, a gambling debt he had not mentioned to any of them. Opportunity looks different when you owe money. To Abel, Leon repeated, lifting his drink. But he didn't sip. He watched the clock mounted above the bar mirror. Celebrations are loud, but intent can be quiet. At 4:52 p.m., Abel's phone buzzed again. He frowned. It wasn't Helios. It was his day job supervisor. He stepped out of the booth to hear better. "Abel, mister," Klein said on the other end, voice unusually warm. "We heard the news. Word travels. We're proud of you, son." Abel blinked. "You heard?" "Of course. You think talent stays secret long?" A small chuckle. "Listen, a few of us chipped in. Nothing extravagant, just something for your appointment, a proper suit. Swing by before we close. We'd like to congratulate you properly." Abel's chest tightened. Mr. Klein had stayed late more than once to help him access lab equipment, had signed off on small supply requisitions he didn't strictly need to approve. Quiet support. "You don't have to." "We want to," Klein interrupted. "Before 5:30 if you can." Abel checked the time. 5:03 p.m. He returned to the booth. "My boss wants me to stop by," he said. "They got me something, a suit." Tyrone grinned. "Man, look at you." "I'll drive you," Marcus offered immediately. Abel shook his head. "Nah, you've all had drinks. No police stops today." He smiled lightly. "I'll grab an Uber. Be back in an hour." Leon's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You sure?" Leon asked. It's on my way. Positive, Abel replied. No risks. No risks. But risk doesn't always announce itself. Abel stepped outside and dialed Lorraine first. Ma, I have to stop by work real quick. They want to congratulate me. I'll be home after. Her voice carried joy and something softer. Don't stay out too late. I won't. Then Clara. I need to swing by the office, he told her, just to explain things properly. I'll come see you after. She hesitated for half a second. Okay, she said gently. Text me when you get there. I will. He ended the call and requested the ride. Across the bar window, Leon watched through the reflection. His phone buzzed. A message preview lit up briefly before he tilted the screen away. Is he on schedule? Leon typed one word back. Leaving. Inside the bar, Marcus frowned slightly. You good? Tyrone asked Leon. Leon forced a smile. Yeah, he said, just thinking. Outside, an Uber pulled to the curb. Abel slid into the back seat, still smiling, still replaying $5 million in Sunlight Kitchens and unborn heartbeats in his mind. At 5:17 p.m., Abel Carter was on his way to work. He never arrived. And that was the last confirmed sighting anyone would ever have of him alive. The next morning, Lorraine waited. She kept the kettle on longer than necessary, left the front curtain slightly open, listened for footsteps in the hallway that never came. But she told herself he was busy. Success rearranges schedules. Clara waited too. Her phone screen still held his last message. On my way to work. 30 minutes passed, then 60. Calls went unanswered. At first she blamed poor reception, then battery life, then celebration distraction. But hope weakens with repetition. At 2:14 a.m., she dialed Lorraine. Has he come home? Silence on the other end. No. That word shifted everything. By sunrise, police were notified. Abel Carter never arrived at his job. Mr. Klein confirmed it twice, voice shaken the second time. He said he was coming, the manager insisted. We stayed late. The suit's still here. The Helios Grid Systems demonstration slot came and went the following afternoon. He didn't appear. A representative emailed once, then again. Polite confusion, professional disappointment. But their tone cooled quickly. Opportunity does not wait for the missing. The police filed a report. Male, 26. Last seen leaving the Rusty Bolt around 5:17 p.m. Entered a rideshare vehicle. Destination, his workplace. No witnesses reported a struggle. No emergency calls from his phone. No hospital admissions under his name. Just absence. In that neighborhood, officers handled 3 missing person calls a week. Most returned within days, some didn't. Adults have the right to leave, one detective said carefully. But adults do not abandon $5 million. They do not ignore pregnant girlfriends. They do not forget sunlight promises. Therefore, something interrupted him. Marcus, Tyrone, and Leon were questioned separately. They all said the same thing. He was on his way to work. Leon's voice did not tremble. Police requested rideshare data. The record showed a completed trip. Drop-off location log 2 blocks from the office. But surveillance cameras near the building were under maintenance that evening. Convenient. 3 days later, the Uber Abels took was found parked near an industrial lot 10 miles from his intended route. Locked. Undisturbed. His phone charger still inside. His phone was also found, but no Uber driver. Prototype case not present. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints beyond his own and the usual passengers. It looked staged. But staged by whom? Detectives used the word mystery. They used the phrase, no evidence of foul play. They tried all they could to find the driver, but they didn't know, let alone who he was. It became more of a mystery. They said there was no indication he ran voluntarily. His bank accounts were untouched. His email inactive, his passport at home. He had vanished mid-trajectory. Theories bloomed faster than facts. Some whispered corporate theft, that Helios grid systems lured him, extracted his design, removed the obstacle. Others looked closer to home. Hidden envy, debt, opportunity shift in loyalty. Friends began suspecting each other without saying it directly. Marcus avoided Leon's eyes. Tyrone stopped answering group calls. Leon kept his statements consistent. Clara kept checking the window. Every passing car made her stand. Every unfamiliar footstep tightened her chest. She replayed his voice from that evening. "I'll text you when I get there." He never did. Lorraine stopped sleeping properly after the fourth night. She folded and refolded the same dish towel until the fabric thinned. "Adults don't disappear," she whispered once to the detective. He didn't respond. Because sometimes they do. But not like this. Not with everything intact. Not with the world finally opening. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The file moved from active to cold. And somewhere inside that absence, one detail remained unresolved. The rideshare driver remembered dropping Abel off, but he also remembered something else. A second vehicle waiting near the curb. Engine running, as if it knew exactly when to arrive. The investigation stretched, then thinned. Search grids were mapped, industrial lots swept, phone records subpoenaed, rideshare logs dissected, friends re-interviewed. But every lead dissolved under scrutiny. No ransom, no financial movement, no confirmed sighting beyond 5:17 p.m. The candlelight vigil came on a humid Thursday evening. Neighbors gathered, former co-workers, friends who avoided each other's eyes. Lorraine stood between Clara and Abel's friends, holding a photograph enlarged from a graduation picture, Abel smiling into a future that never arrived. "Bring him home," someone whispered into the night. But the night kept its silence. Months passed. Then Clara's body changed. Grief became physical, but so did hope. The pregnancy grew heavier with each unanswered question. Some advised her to move on. Others spoke about closure as if it were something you could purchase. But the child was a tether. Therefore she held on. When the boy was born, Lorraine cried before Clara did. They named him Leo Arthur Carter. Leo. Close enough to Leon that it unsettled the friends the first time they heard it, and they laughed really hard as if they remembered something. Arthur. The name Abel once joked he would use if he ever wanted to sound like a serious inventor. His friends then would joke that people might think it's Leon's son, and they all burst into a huge laughter. Time does not heal absence. It layers over it. Months became years. The case moved fully into cold storage. But inside their small home, Abel's presence never did. Leo grew into his father's face. Same sharp brow. Same focused stare. Same habit of dismantling household appliances just to understand heat exchange and current flow. At 9, he took apart a toaster and rebuilt it with improved insulation. At 13, he corrected a physics teacher mid-lecture. At 16, he found the old prototype casing stored in the back closet. Dust-covered, incomplete, but intact. He didn't treat it like a relic. He treated it like a blueprint. "Grandma," he said one afternoon, spreading schematics across the kitchen table, "he wasn't finished." Lorraine's hands trembled slightly. "He was just starting," she replied. Leo studied the recycled composite layering, the modular coupling system, and the thermal feedback loops. He understood it. Not emotionally. Technically. Therefore, the legacy shifted from memory to momentum. By his final year at university, Leo had rebuilt and refined the system into something cleaner, more stable, more efficient. Professors called him gifted. Investors began asking quiet questions. His capstone project was selected for exhibition at a national renewable innovation showcase hosted inside a technology museum. Students received tickets, families were invited, faculty would attend. A public demonstration, a room full of prototypes, a celebration of innovation. Clara ironed his shirt that morning with hands steadier than she felt. "You're not chasing him," she said carefully. "You're building yourself." Leo smiled. "I know," but he packed his father's original ring into his jacket pocket anyway. At the museum entrance, banners announced emerging energy solutions and historic technological breakthroughs displayed side by side. Past, present, future. Lorraine had stayed back home. She said she will never go to the exhibition because it kind of makes her sick seeing people peeled like that and turned into a specimen. It might make her fall sick because something about museums unsettled her. Preserved history always does. "Grandma," Leo said, "it's okay, me and Mom would go." Inside, exhibits were arranged in sterile rows under bright lights. Cataloged, numbered, presented with clinical precision. And at the far end of the hall, behind reinforced glass, a new installation had just been unveiled. It drew a crowd. Leo hadn't seen it yet, but Clara had, and the air left her lungs before she understood why. The museum auditorium hummed with controlled anticipation. Leo adjusted the final coupling on the modular frame and glanced toward the seating section where his mother sat. Clara gave him a steady nod, though her fingers were laced too tightly in her lap. "Go," she mouthed. He stepped forward. "Today I'm presenting a scalable renewable system built from recycled composites and adaptive thermal capture," Leo began. "It's efficient, affordable, designed for communities priced out of energy independence." He didn't say inherited, but the executives in the front row already knew whose work this echoed. He activated the system. The screens flickered, input stabilized, output began to climb. 40% above baseline, then 50. Engineers leaned forward, tablets came out, numbers were recalculated in real time. The system didn't fluctuate, it held. Therefore, the atmosphere changed. Measured curiosity became visible excitement. When the cycle completed, applause followed. Restrained at first, then sustained. One executive approached him, expression sharpened by interest. "We reviewed archival patent attempts from Abel Carter," she said evenly. "Your father's disappearance was tragic. This feels like completion." Leo held her gaze. "For my mother," he said quietly. "Not for legacy headlines. Not for valuation. For her." Behind him, Clara stood. She meant to walk toward the lobby to steady herself. Pride was overwhelming, but so was memory. The museum's side hall featured a temporary installation titled Energy Through History. Rare prototypes, reclaimed devices, historical artifacts displayed behind reinforced glass. She hadn't intended to look closely, but one case drew her without explanation. It wasn't the placard. It wasn't the lighting. It was something small, resting near the preserved anatomical specimen displayed within. A ring, gold casing, jade strap. Her pulse stuttered. No. She stepped closer. The placard described the specimen clinically. Recovered from a dismantled private collector network specializing in biomedical acquisitions. Identity unknown. Estimated age at time of death, late 20s. Unknown. But the ring was not unknown. Clara pressed her palm against the glass. There was engraving inside that casing. She remembered it clearly. A private joke the week Abel insisted jade brought daily blessings. The museum had placed a small magnification scope beside the display for detailed viewing. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the lens over the ring. The engraving sharpened. A +C. Her breath fractured. No. She moved the scope downward. The specimen's lower leg was partially visible beneath preservation resin. There. A thin surgical metal plate along the ankle bone. Years ago, Lorraine had told her about it. How Abel had ignored her warning not to ride his bicycle too soon after a minor procedure. How he crashed. how they laughed later despite the stitches. Clara had teased him about it while tracing the faint scar one night. Her vision blurred. Behind her, applause echoed from the demonstration hall. Leo was shaking hands. Executives were speaking numbers. One leaned closer. "If negotiations proceed smoothly," the woman said, "we're prepared to structure an offer exceeding $100 million, $300,000 annually for research leadership." Leo absorbed it slowly. More than his father had ever been offered. Therefore, more than enough to rewrite history. He turned, searching for his mother to tell her. He found chaos instead. Clara's voice cut through the gallery. "That's my husband." Head snapped toward her. Museum staff rushed forward, attempting to lower her voice. She pulled away, pointing at the glass. "You turned him into this? He's not unidentified. His name is Abel Carter." Security hesitated. Visitors began recording. She fumbled for her phone and dialed. Her voice shook but did not break. "Come to the museum. Now, it's Abel." That was Loretta that she called Leo's grandma. Then another call. Police. "My husband is here," she said, almost screaming. "He's been here this whole time." Inside the auditorium, Leo heard the commotion. He stepped away from the executives mid-sentence and moved toward the sound. He saw his mother. Face pale, hand against the glass, eyes blazing with recognition and fury. He saw the ring. He saw the ankle. And something inside him aligned with terrible clarity. The offer. The legacy. The disappearance. They were never separate stories. Police arrived within minutes. Questions flooded the room. Who authorized acquisition of the specimen? When was it transferred? From whom? As officers secured the exhibit area, Leo stood frozen. One moment he had completed his father's work. The next, he was staring at his father preserved as museum artifact. The executives were no longer speaking about contracts. They were speaking quietly to legal counsel. Because generational triumph had just collided with generational crime. And this time, the glass case had a name. The story went viral before anyone could even catch their breath. Clara's discovery at the museum spread like wildfire. Screenshots of the gold ring, the jade strap, and the microscope images circulated across social media. News outlets picked it up. Headlines screamed, "Missing inventor found in museum exhibit, a legacy preserved or a crime." The museum closed the exhibit immediately. The artifact was seized. Forensic analysts worked through the night. Every detail was cross-checked. The ring. The exact same ring Clara had photographed from her phone. Matched perfectly. The engraving read, "Abel from Love, Loretta." Before Lorraine even arrived, Clara had shown the staff the photo of the ring. They examined it carefully. She had even made a similar one for Leo, a small replica engraved "Leo from Love, Clara." The truth became unavoidable. The so-called art that the world had admired for 20 years was not art at all. It was a murdered genius. Executives, students, museum staff. All were awed and horrified. They murmured about the precision of the preservation, the clinical arrangement of the specimen, the obsessive detail in Abel's life that now seemed grotesquely frozen in time. Staff insisted the acquisitions had been legal. The owner echoed the claim, calm and precise. "All items obtained through proper channels," he said, over and over, as if repetition could insulate him from disbelief. But legal ownership didn't erase truth. The exhibit was taken away for DNA testing. The museum doors closed indefinitely. The state already stepped in, following the story closely. The owner consented immediately, assigning a liaison, an employee who regularly brokered acquisitions, to handle the DNA verification. Investigators traced the provenance of the specimen. Eventually, one name surfaced, Marcus Reed, or rather, the supplier who shared his surname. The trail connected the exhibition to Marcus's family. It was a callback. Rumors had circulated months after Abel's disappearance. Sudden, unexplained wealth, travel at odd hours. new international connections. Leo had mentioned Marcus once to the police, reluctantly, and then retracted it. He didn't want to believe betrayal could come so close. But Marcus was already gone. He had left the country, no forwarding address. Some whispered the Caribbean, others guessed South America. The case began to cool. Police summoned Abel's remaining friends, Tyrone, Leon, and others, for questioning. They were now married. They answered politely. They admitted Marcus had sometimes been jealous. They admitted he had whispered behind Abel's back. But they insisted they had never considered it dangerous, never imagined it could lead here. Documents recovered from the museum linked directly to Marcus. 2 of Abel's friends admitted they knew Marcus's brother, who had acted as intermediary in transactions. They had all agreed together at the time, unaware that it would someday become a trail pointing to murder. The investigation stalled. Every lead traced back to Marcus, but Marcus had vanished into thin air. The DNA test was pending. The world waited. Students who had come to the museum for educational exhibits now whispered, shocked over their lab coats. Executives who had marveled at Abel's legacy now questioned every acquisition, every connection. And Leo watched it all. He thought of his father, of his mother, of the child he had become, the continuation of a life that had been stolen. But one question remained. Was Marcus really gone? Or had he only moved shadows, keeping secrets behind a thin veneer of legality and distance? The answer would determine not just justice for Abel, but whether the legacy he left behind could ever truly be safe. And for Leo, it was no longer just science, invention, or memory. It was a pursuit of truth, and Marcus had already disappeared. 3 weeks later, the DNA results came back. Confirmed. Abel Carter. The world erupted. News outlets ran the story nonstop. Social media lit up with outrage and disbelief. For 20 years, a genius had been preserved as a specimen. Now the truth was undeniable. Leo, 24, sat in his lab. A genius in tech, but grief had sharpened his mind into something colder, more precise. He didn't just want justice. He wanted Marcus. Using his father's reconstructed Helios tech, he built a digital footprint tracker. Sun-powered algorithms scanned satellite feeds, public cameras, and open-source AI recognition for Marcus's known gait and facial structure. Hours of scanning distilled into a single pinpoint, a villa just outside St. Kitts. He traced a phone number, too. He called. The ringtone buzzed, then a voice dripping with casual arrogance. "Hello? I'm Leo, Abel Carter's son." A pause, then laughter. "How did you get this number?" "I know why you're calling," Marcus said, voice tight. "I read the news about your father, my friend. Your brother's there too, Cain, right?" Leo asked. "Yes," Marcus hissed, almost gleeful. "Cain's here with me, and I suppose you want answers." Leo's hands clenched the phone. "Tell me what you did to my father." Marcus laughed. "Oh, you want details? You'll love this." Leo's chest tightened. Tears pricked his eyes. Rage and grief tangled into a weight he could hardly bear. "We followed your father that night," Marcus began. "Uber driver first. I shot him on a long corner. Then me and Cain tailed Abel after he ran into the wilderness, seeing that we shot the Uber man. Abel didn't know what hit him. I didn't fire. I held the pipe. Cain made sure the shot landed." Leo's knuckles whitened. Marcus continued, voice dripping with mock sympathy. "It's not fair, Art. Your dad's always the lucky one. If I can't have the tech, I can at least sell his body parts." The first blow, crack, empty skull. Marcus laughed, not quietly, but the kind of laughter that bruised ears. Then another, and another. Each strike, each blow recounted as if retold for sport. "What did you do with him?" Leo demanded. Marcus chuckled. "Van, warm body, not quite dead yet. But to the world, ghost, specimen, perfect preservation." He continued almost gleefully. "Cain helped me. Disgraced med student runs a little underground specimen mill. Bone, cadavers, rare collectors. No one asks questions. Leo staggered, stunned by the cold precision of their plan. Marcus added casually, "What no one knew, my secrets, the drug network, mid-level, regional, easy cover." But Abel, he was climbing, rising, friends moving on, leaving me behind. I couldn't compete. So I ensured he wouldn't rise any further. A beat of silence. Then Marcus's laughter again. Neon reflections of industrial district alleyways painted across his voice over the phone. He was walking, shifting, smiling, proud of the terror he had wrought. Leo's hands shook, but his mind worked. "I will make you pay," he said. Marcus casually said, "I'm a drug lord now. I will track you down if you continue this part. I don't want to have you killed too, you fool." But Leo had memorized every detail, every step Marcus admitted, every taunt, every confession, every name and date. He recorded everything he said. This was more than grief. This was inheritance. Not inheritance of money, not inheritance of tech. Inheritance of truth and vengeance. Because Marcus had forgotten one thing, one flaw. Abel's son had learned from the father. He would find a way. He would make him pay. But the first step, the first crack in Marcus's empire had to be precise, calculated. And it began with the phone call, the confession, the laughter echoing down neon alleyways. It was a map, and Leo was ready to follow it. But Marcus didn't know that Abel's legacy wasn't just in tech. It was in his son. The son who had been watching, learning, waiting. The son who now held the first thread of justice. And he would not let go. The question now, how far would Leo go to ensure Marcus paid for every strike, every crime, every stolen life? The answer would come. But not yet. Leo sat across from the police detectives in a quiet, sterile briefing room. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence. "I'd traced them," he said, voice calm but precise, like every word had been calculated. "Using my father's Helios technology, satellite scans, AI gate recognition, facial reconstruction, sun-powered algorithms, it led me straight to Marcus and his brother Cain." The officers exchanged glances. Some whispered under their breath. One asked almost half-jokingly, "You ever think of joining the FB1? Leo smiled faintly. "I'm building my father's legacy right now, but once this case is closed, maybe I could help." He passed them a detailed file. Screenshots, satellite images, timestamps, communications. Every step meticulously documented. Police later reconstructed fragments of the crime. Blunt force trauma, multiple strikes to the skull. Transported in Marcus's car. Abel died within minutes. The timeline was clear. Marcus had called Cain afterward. Coordinated movement. The body vanished within days into the underground anatomy market. And sold to the museum under a legal name, not knowing it was a chain of evil people. Therefore, the owner of the museum was innocent. He bought the specimen through a liaison thinking it was real. Abel Carter became inventory. Marcus fled shortly after. New identity, new routes. Drug shipments crisscrossed the Caribbean. Authorities traced him once. Curacao, then Trinidad, then nothing. Weeks turned to months. Investigators tried to follow leads. They combed through satellite feeds, passenger manifests, shipping logs. Each time Marcus changed location faster than the system could track. But Leo had other ideas. He found Marcus again. This time, he didn't call the police. Not yet. The memory of Marcus laughing as he recounted the night Abel died burned inside Leo. Every strike, every taunt, every sickening blow. Leo's vengeance would be sharper than any law enforcement could deliver. He constructed a network of anonymous digital drops. His father's Helios tech repurposed. Sun-powered satellites, encrypted feeds, location tracking. He exposed Marcus's new identity, his hideout, and his history of skimming from rival drug cartels. Video evidence, GPS coordinates, dates, times, the works. He delivered it anonymously to rival gangs, the ones Marcus had cheated, stolen from, betrayed. Then he sat down at home with his grandmother Lorraine and his mother Clara. They watched the news together. A villa in the Caribbean, Marcus's villa, went up in flames. The broadcast didn't show faces, just fire, smoke, chaos. But everyone understood. The rivals had caught him. He was televised, hung, and also peeled alive. He and his brother got the same justice. It was like karma of what happened to Abel. Cartels are good with brutal endings. Leo had specifically told them he would give the rival gangs Marcus's location if they would peel him and his brother Cain. Therefore, they agreed, but they never knew who dropped the location, and they were glad either way that they would get Marcus and Cain, and they kept to their promise eventually. Leo didn't pull triggers. He didn't need to. He had orchestrated it, and the world saw the outcome. The flames, the chaos, the destruction. He had transformed Marcus's arrogance into a downfall, using only his father's technology and his own intellect. The phone buzzed intermittently with updates. Every message confirmed the chaos, the demise, the exposure. Leo's mother reached for his hand. Her fingers shook. Lorraine, silent, let her eyes fill with tears. Pride and fear tangled together. "You," Clara whispered. "You made him pay." Leo didn't answer. He only stared at the screen. He could see the patterns, the destruction, the calculated collapse. Some of Abel's old friends heard of it afterward. Tyrone, Leon, they couldn't believe it. "The boy, he became a monster," one whispered. Leo had become more than a genius inventor. He had become an executioner. But in his mind it was justice. Perfect, precise, unstoppable. The broadcast repeated, neon flames against turquoise Caribbean waters, Marcus's empire reduced to ash. And Leo sat there, hands clasped, a shadow of grief still in his eyes. Because vengeance had been served. And yet, nothing could bring Abel back. But for the first time in 24 years, the Carter family saw closure. Therefore, the world learned a chilling truth. Intelligence, grief, and rage combined could become unstoppable. And the man responsible for turning Abel Carter into a ghost had finally been claimed by the ghosts of his own making. But the question lingered in every mind who knew the story. Was Leo still his father's son? Or something else entirely? Something darker. Next day, the police was in front of Leo's family house, notebooks open, eyes sharp. "Were you involved in what happened to Marcus?" one asked, voice neutral. Leo shook his head, calm. "No, I didn't touch him." But they laughed and didn't entirely disbelieve him. There was a small tension in the atmosphere, a quiet acknowledgement that justice had been served one way or another. Marcus was gone. The case was closed. And somewhere beneath it all, they were secretly glad. Life in Newark had fractured around absence. 20 years of grief had left marks on every wall, every corner of the city. Lorraine aged faster than years allowed, her hair silvered, her hands lined with work and worry. But Leo had inherited more than genius. He had inherited Abel's promise, Abel's vision, Abel's fire. The HelioCell deal finalized. $100 million, $300,000 per month to lead the team. The city hummed with news of the invention's impact. Power grids lit up neighborhoods that had been dark for decades. Businesses flourished. Schools buzzed with students using solar energy they could actually afford. Leo kept promises too. Tyrone, Leon, friends of Abel, friends of the family. Each received $1 million, a gift of loyalty and gratitude. Abel's word carried forward by his son. And for Lorraine, Clara, Abel's wife, and the children, he bought a house, worthy of sunlight. A mighty home stretching across hills, walls painted in warmth, windows capturing every dawn. All of them lived under one roof. Laughter filled the halls. Life, once fractured by grief, had returned in full force. Abel's children carried his legacy, his name, and his obsession with invention. The son named after Abel, the daughter after Clara. A quiet tribute to past and future intertwined. The house became a sanctuary, a place for family, for memory, for rebuilding. Abel Carter was finally laid to rest. The valley received him. 20 years late, a simple ceremony surrounded by family, friends, and sunlight pouring over the casket like a benediction. The backyard of the house Leo had built became his final resting place. Leo stood in his father's lab afterward, soldering iron in hand. The walls smelled of metal and ambition. Panels hummed in harmony. The room vibrated with quiet energy, not mystical, but intellectual. Every wire, every circuit, every prototype carried the pulse of Abel's mind, reborn in Leo's hands. The sun shone through the windows. Panels on the roof captured its warmth. Electricity coursed through streets, powering homes, businesses, dreams. 20 years of absence, grief, and injustice condensed into this moment. The family was whole again. The invention thrived. The legacy endured. Leo picked up a circuit board, fingers precise. A spark of light caught on solder. He smiled. The reincarnation wasn't mystical. It wasn't some hidden miracle. It was intellect. It was persistence. It was Abel, alive again in the work of his son. And for the first time in 2 decades, the Vances were finally home. But the memory of every choice, every loss, every betrayal still lingered in the corners of the lab. Therefore, every spark, every panel, every hum carried not just energy, but the weight of a life stolen and finally reclaimed. Sunlight, power, home. And the story at last had found its balance. So, what do we take from all of this? Was justice really served when Marcus met his end? Was it right for Leo to take matters into his own hands, to orchestrate revenge instead of letting the law do its work? Or was it inevitable, a necessary reckoning after 20 years of lies, murder, and betrayal? Think about it. Abel was stolen from the world. His life ended too soon. His genius turned into a commodity. And yet, Leo used his father's brilliance, his inheritance of intellect and ingenuity, to reclaim what was lost. He didn't just avenge his father. He restored the family, the legacy, and the promise Abel had made so long ago. But is it justifiable? That's for you to decide. Some might say vengeance isn't justice. Others might argue that Leo's actions were the only way to make the world right. And in the end, what did you learn? About ambition, about loyalty, about how far one will go for family, about the consequences of envy and greed. If this story gripped you, if it made your heart race, then make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. More stories like this are coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss them.